Hey, how's it going? I am Jeff Gibbard. I'm a professional speaker. I am the owner of a bunch of different companies, mostly that all fall under the heading of a company called Super Impactful because I want all of my work to be super impactful.
And I'm Jeff Harry with Rediscover Your Play. I cause mischief and make work suck less. And I do a ton of it through speaking.
And so that unites us, the whole speaking thing, among other things, our desire to play and our desire to make an impact. So I always appreciate it. Jeff, I'm glad to be speaking with you again. Today, I want to talk about the privilege of the stage.
Ooh.
I thought you'd be a really good person to talk about because I think one of the things I've always appreciated, aside from your playful spirit, is that I get a sense that you really you love the work you do, but I think you are genuinely grateful for the opportunity to affect people in the ways that you do.
Yeah.
And that's something that I similarly feel about, the opportunity that I get in the work that I do. So I wonder if you could start off with some of the observations you might have about your feeling of, those moments when you're on the stage. You step up there, you look out, you see people waiting to hear what you're about to deliver. You've got material that you've worked on, you've got ideas that you want to share, and you have that moment where you think, wow, these people are here to listen to me. Whoa.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you think about this opportunity that we have, this privilege that we have when we get to be on that stage?
The best advice I've ever heard for someone that's speaking, and actually, it's ironic that I heard this from a politician who was actually telling this to like a kid that was like 13 years old. Like, because she was like, I'm so nervous whenever I go on stage. And the politician like turned her and was just like, it's not about you. Like, it's about the message. And that resonated with me so much because when I'm up on stage, I realize the privilege is that I'm lucky enough to channel this message to people, right? They just so happen to come to hear this message, and I'm lucky enough to be the one that gets to express it. But the way in which I get out of the perfectionist mode of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make a mistake or this, or it's like, as long as the message is communicated on stage, then I am successful. Right. And also this idea of like letting go of the process that it's like, it's not about me. I mean, I don't know. I've met a variety of different speakers, but the speakers I respect the most realize that they're not there for the accolades, man. They're not there for the praise or the high fives or, the fame. Is there originally for the message. And if you think of the best speakers you've ever seen, right? Or the best talks you've ever heard, you remember the message over the person. And then it just so happens that you're like, "Oh yeah, I also love this person." Why? Because they were so real with the message.
When you get up there and you knock it out of the park, or even in instances where you think, I probably could have done that a little bit better. Um, what how do you come back to that part where you think about when you were talking about it, I was thinking about I recently watched this interview with Cat Williams, and he said, I'm just a vessel, right? Like when I get up there, I'm just like it's just I'm just there to deliver it, right?
Yeah.
And that really resonated. And when I heard that, similarly, I felt like, wow, that does take some of the pressure off of the performance, and it puts it more on like it's going to be what it's going to be and you're going to let it out. But you do
Yeah.
have those moments where you really go up there and you crush it and you're like, I know I knocked it out of the park, you get the standing O. And then you have the other ones where you're like, ooh, I don't know if it was really resonating. How do you still come back to the idea that it's the message that's important and that it still remains a privilege to get people's attention for that time, even if you don't knock it out of the park?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting when I knock it out of the park per se, right? Or I do really well. I don't remember what I said. Like,
You're just
like
in it, right?
like talk about flow, right? Talk about being in the play. My last two talks last year were probably some of my most successful talks because I was like, whatever, I don't even care anymore. Like, I've done way too many talks this year. I'm just gonna I'm just do my thing, man. And I got probably more business from that, from like not caring and just being like, who cares? Let's just talk about, let's just be real with one another. That you almost go into like a trance. You almost go into this, like, if you're a runner, like you get that runner's high where you're like, man, how did I run like a mile or 2 miles and I don't even feel it, right? So that's a really amazing feeling. But yeah, there's times when I've also bombed or just not connected as much. And I'm literally on stage being like, this is not going well. And then I tell myself, it's not about you. It's not about you. Like, you still have an opportunity to connect with that one or two or three different people. Th- This this is your opportunity. I say this at the beginning of every talk or to myself. I'm like, this talk could change someone's life. Like, that's the privilege, right?
Yeah.
That's the privilege you have up on stage. It could also just do nothing. People could just like look at their phone the whole time and ignore you. But you have the opportunity to, you know, deeply impact someone's life, to make them feel seen, heard, appreciated, and valued at that very moment in time, and because you are allowed to be on that stage, right? Because you have the privilege to be on that stage, you don't take it for granted, right? And when I take it for granted, it's when I make it about me. When I'm like, well, how am I looking right now? Or, I hope I'm looking cool,
You do. You always look
and
cool.
but then I'm not, because I'm not really, I'm in my head. I'm so in my head and I'm so into like, well, what do they think about me? When frankly, they're not thinking about you. This is which is ironic, right? Because you're up on stage and you think, well, they're all looking at me, so they must be thinking about me. No, they're thinking about the message and how that message relates to them. Us as human beings are very self-centered, so we're constantly thinking of ourselves. So we're only listening to you to figure out how you can help us,
So
right?
there are all different types of speakers, right? There's the ones who, are doing that transformational work. The very nature of their talk is to facilitate change in the world, big
Yeah,
ideas, big ambit, right? And then you also have speakers who are very, very tangible, very practical,
yeah,
and the message that they have is much more grounded in like, how do you make material impact in your company in this
yeah,
marketing way, this sales way, whatever. And I think it can be very easy to see in the big, bold idea talks how that privilege is being exercised when you're on the stage. And I think sometimes it can be a little bit more difficult to see it when we're getting very, very practical about the
yeah.
topics. How do you think what do you think is a good mindset, a good framing for people wherever they are in that spectrum of very, very tangible ideas to very, very aspirational ideas, to recognize kind of what you just said, that even if you're saying, here's a few sales techniques, that you actually do fundamentally carry with that talk the ability to change someone's life? And how do you make sure that stays present for people? Like, are that, you mentioned that you say something to yourself before you get on stage. I have my own kind of
Yeah.
pre-stage practice mantras that I say in my head. How do you how do you frame that for people so that they can see if they're thinking to themselves, well, I don't talk about changing the world. I talk about, some very basic topic in HR or something, right? How do you get them to see that there is privilege in that opportunity and that they can play it a little bit bigger?
You embrace this concept that you are a teacher. Both my sisters are teachers. I used to teach through Lego, engineering through Lego, right? And when you think of a teacher and their ability to teach math to a kid that hates math or has no desire to come to school to learn math, right? That is changing that person's life, right? So extrapolate that to like someone that's teaching, basic concepts of AI, right? Or basic concepts of sales. Hey, let's say you were able to train someone in basic concepts of sales. You are helping them put money in their pocket so they can feed their family. That's impactful. Now, you might think it's not that big of a deal because you're just like, I'm just explaining certain tangible strategies, right? Or I'm explaining what the cloud is to somebody, but you're impacting their life because you're making their work easier, right? Like you're lifting this burden of like, oh, I was so intimidated by AI, and now you've explained it in a way that now I'm like, okay, maybe I can build a relationship with Chat GBT, right? Or the Google version of AI. Like you're reducing the walls of lack of understanding, So even if you're not doing the like change the world talk, you're empowering people to actually believe they can do it. They can do it, whatever do it means.
Yeah.
You're empowering them to believe that it's possible for them to learn. And that's empowering, right? That also ties into a core, feeling that we're constantly looking for, which is not feeling alone.
Yeah.
This idea of like, oh, okay, I don't get it. Oh, but this person up on stage also used to not get it, and now they get it. So now I don't feel alone because I thought I was the only one that didn't understand. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Oh,
Have you
totally.
felt that?
I totally do, and what also just occurred to me is that I feel like there's also this other side to it, right? So there's the people that are doing a talk and they're teaching, and they may not see that it's a privilege to have the opportunity to do that, right? So they're on the like, well, I don't even know if it's like it doesn't feel big enough to them. It doesn't feel important enough.
Mm,
Maybe like it just feels like it's a job, and they don't
yeah.
really um, necessarily like appreciate like just how much of an opportunity is to be up there, such a privilege to actually connect with people. I think there's also, and maybe you've met people like this, but have you ever met a speaker who feels almost an entitlement to the stage? Like,
Mm,
oh, I have such everything I say
mhm.
is so very important. But then when you actually hear them, when you talk to them, you see you actually aren't really digging deep enough. You have so much more that you could be saying, you could be
Yeah.
teaching, that you could be pushing. You're not honoring the privilege up there because you feel entitled to it. So
Yeah.
there's sort of like on the one side, how do you encourage people to be aspirational, empowered about taking that stage and honoring the privilege? And then at the other side, how do you create a mindset where you are humble enough to realize that you can go bigger and that you can push harder? And this is part about, really in your work of like rediscovering your play. There's a point where you kind of get atrophied in your position,
Mhm.
and that's, I think, when that entitlement sets in. What are
Mhm.
some of the things you do to make sure that you're keeping it fresh for yourself and you're honoring that privilege of the stage instead of just delivering the same thing? You mentioned that talk you gave that where you just kind of were
Yeah.
like, whatever, it's the end of the year, like let me
Yeah.
just go out there and have fun. And there's something refreshing and you know, uh, obviously that's a good tactic you could take of just kind of like not putting the pressure on yourself and just going out there and doing it. But how do you make sure you don't get stuck and feel entitled to deliver that same message instead of pushing to improve it and honoring that privilege?
Yeah. This fits for me. I don't know if it fits for other people, but I'm constantly creating more talks. I'm constantly evolving the talks that I have as well, right?
Mhm.
I mean, heck, I'm doing a talk on Barbie and psychological safety this year.
Amazing.
I don't know how it's gonna go. I have no idea. Like this is kind of the risk. I mean, I don't know. When I used to dabble in stand-up comedy, and the whole idea is you're constantly coming up with new bits. You're
Yep.
constantly messing around and changing things up. And sometimes even, and you see this with some like, veteran comedians where they'll start with something that they've never tried before and then they dig their way out of it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm constantly creating challenges for myself on stage to be like, all right, you want to try something new? Like I just rolled out a new talk 2 weeks ago, advocating for the 4-day work week. I had to do all this research to find out about the 4-day work week, which I didn't even know. And then all of a sudden now I'm doing it in like a big stage coming up in like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. So this is what I do to challenge myself is I'm constantly trying to be there are bigger opportunities for me to connect with the audience, and what am I doing to do that? And then if I get bored and I get bored of a certain talk, I stop doing it, or I have to change it up a little bit, because I'm not doing right by the audience if I'm bored up there, or if I'm taking it for granted, right? It's actually kind of sad to see some speakers taking the stage for granted and kind of mailing it in
Yep.
because they think they're still amazing stuff, but the audience is kind of getting checked out, right? Because they know that you are bored of it, or even if they don't know, they there's just a feeling of like a detachment.
Yeah.
And the whole point of being on stage, the privilege of being on stage is you're giving a gift to the audience. So when you don't feel as if it's a gift anymore, then what are you doing on stage?
100% agree with that. I want to close this show out by you and me just kind of going back and forth, one or two things that we each kind of keep in our back pocket, keep in our mind, ways that we show up for ourselves to get up on that stage and continually honor the privilege that that stage presents for us. So I'll give you mine first, and then I'm going to
Yeah.
turn it back over to you. So one of the things that's important to me in all of my work, and this has become sort of the headline for all of my work, is there's a lot of ways to change the world. Here's one. So in everything that I do, it's all about that. There's got to be some sort of a massive, and not even massive. It just needs to be an impact in what it is that I'm doing. Right. So when I go up on stage, I apply the alter ego technique of, sort of like the Kobe had the Black Mamba
Mhm.
mentality. Right. And there's a book by, I believe, Todd Henry is the guy's name, I think. Or Todd Herman. I forget. It's a book called The Alter Ego. It's a really good book. Whatever, look it up. But I kind of took that idea and I basically give myself a name before I go up on stage. And
Oh.
yeah, so in my head, before I go up
Mm.
on stage, I'm not Jeff on stage. Okay. And this is a little bit complicated, especially if you're a comic book nerd. You're going to see that there's a bit of a contradiction in here. But my stage name for myself is Magneto. And the reason why, again, if you're a comic book person, you're going to see there's potentially some complexities here. But the reason is that
Magneto.
I want to be magnetic up there. I want to draw people in and I want to bring them into my movement. Now, again, don't look up Magneto's movements. It's not the important part. The important part is just that I want to be magnetic and I want to bring people in to an idea. Again, it's the message. I want to take an idea, whether it's about lovable leadership or it's building a heroic brand or it's becoming superhuman or it's about the incredible invisible power of neurodiversity at work. Any of those things, I want to draw people into this idea. And that reminds me of how I present, right? I need to make sure that I'm not just delivering the content or saying the content, but I'm presenting, I'm performing the content and bringing them in with my magnetism, right? But that it's always there's got to be an idea that I'm trying to bring them into and
Mm.
motivate them to join as part of that movement.
Mm.
So that's one of the things I do to keep myself, because if I just went up on stage and I said, "Here is my content, let me teach you thing," and
Right.
I'm not asking something more of them, I'm not asking them to give of themselves to a bigger idea, then I'm not doing my job as Magneto up on stage. So that's one of the things that I do before I get on stage. What's something that you do to honor the privilege of the stage?
Um, wait, hold on. First, I had to look up Magneto quotes.
Oh,
Do you ever say when you're on stage, Charles,
I, d-
a
I mean,
game of
unless
chess, Charles? Or do you ever go, peace was never an option? Like, do you ever do that? Do you ever quote
again, you're if you look too
any
deeply into it,
Magneto phrase? I'm looking at all these phrases. So many
you're gonna
good
shake up
phrases.
the metaphor, and it's not gonna work as well.
You are a god among insects. Never let anyone tell you different.
See, now you're making it weird because it's all about the magnetism and the movement. It's not about the specifics. It's also about
I
the
love
storyline. Which
Magneto.
writer are we looking
Magneto
at?
is one of my favorite characters, and also one of the most powerful characters of
Extremely
all of
powerful.
X-Men.
Yeah,
Can we just admit that for
yeah.
a second?
We
Like,
can definitely
he
admit that.
lifted up a stadium for people, for goodness
I
sake,
mean, in
people.
some
Like,
of the
come on,
comic book runs, he switched
come
the
on,
polarity of
come
the
on,
Earth. I
man.
mean, it was pretty intense. Anyway,
Yeah.
we're
Well,
going
we
down
can
the
nerd out
nerd
about
rabbit hole.
that.
This is
Um,
another podcast,
do
but
you know?
anyway,
Do you know what I? Do you know what I do that I think is really helpful? I talk to as many people in the audience before I start.
that's a good one.
So usually everybody hides in the back or is in the green room or wants to come out in this magical way, like you couldn't talk to me and now I'm here and now I'm gone again. Dude, I'm hanging out with people in the audience. I'm talking. I want to meet as many people beforehand and find out what are they doing here? Why they come to this talk? What's motive? What are you interested in? So that I can tangibly respond while I'm up on stage. And I will reference actual people. So a thing that I do that I really enjoy, and I recently did this at the National Council for Mental Well-being, is I found out all these people's stories beforehand, and then I shared those stories on stage. I just heard those stories like 1 hour beforehand, 30 minutes beforehand. And then it would be like, where's Deirdre? Deirdre just started last year. This is her 1 year anniversary. The way she found her job is this way, right? And people are amazed, first of all, because they're like, wow, you really are connected with people. But also, I'm just fascinated and interested in people, right? And what motivated them to be there at that time. And then again, not making it about me. I'm
Yeah.
making it about them. I'm trying to understand them. I'm trying to connect with them. And frankly, especially when you do that on a stage where people know Deidre or know the people that are out there, then you're like, wow, you caught that story? I didn't even know that story. Now I want to talk to more people and find out their story. So there's an example just in that of like constantly trying to connect. I'm constantly trying to attune. And for anyone that's like, what's a tune or attunement? Attunement is the first way in which we play. It's the way in which when you're a baby, you look into your parents' eyes, and it's one of the only times your brain waves match identically with your parent, you know, or the person that is taking care of you. So you have a certain level of attunement, and then you look for that level of connection for the rest of your life through your relationships, through your friendships, through work. So I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to attune between me and the audience, or have the audience attune with each other, because when that happens, that's where the magic is, or that's where I believe the magic is.
I absolutely love that, and that has inspired me to. I sometimes am like a little worn out before I get on stage. Like I just feel like I'm like conserving the energy so I can give it all up there.
Mhm.
But I have found that in the instances where I connect with a few people beforehand, I do feel more connected with the audience. And
Mhm.
I too am deeply curious about people and their stories. So I really enjoy the kind of the call to be more curious prior to and connect with the people, so that when you're up there, part of that privilege is the privilege to talk to the people that are there. And if you know who those people are, I feel like that enhances it pretty significantly. So I think that's a really good tip for people. So to close out, you know, I think that being on the stage is obviously an opportunity for everyone, and that's part of the reason we wanted our Play Day Summit to be this opportunity for people to come in and really take full advantage of what that privilege will be when they get up there, to have an idea that's worth sharing, to have a message that is worth impacting people with, and to build some of the skills around networking and connecting with people so that they can better enrich their own ability to connect with people prior to getting up on stage. Anything else you want to finish off with before we send this
Yeah, and
episode
there's
off?
also just a privilege in putting the title of speaker
Yeah.
on, your LinkedIn or your business card, or you're on your website. And I think there's a power in us gathering as speakers at the Play Day Summit, right? Where we get to meet all these other people that are really doing amazing work to impact the world through just simply their voice. If you think about it, it's very difficult. It's just you and a microphone. That's it. Maybe
Yep.
a PowerPoint presentation if you're lucky, right? And to meet all these other people and be like, oh, wow, that's what you do on stage. That's how you gear up to go on stage. Oh, that's what you've done to figure out how to progress in this business. Like, it's gonna be such a privilege to have so many phenomenal speakers in one room sharing with each other,
Yep.
right? Because again, the Play Day Summit's not about us. It's not about like, look at us the whole time. It's about you and you learning from each other, and connecting and playing with each other, in a way to learn how to be a better speaker. So that just the privilege of that moment. Ooh, I can't wait for that at
Yeah,
the
it's
Play
going
Day
to
Summit.
be super cool. I am very much looking forward to spending that day with you and all of the other folks who are helping to put this on. And I 100% agree with you about that. That the real privilege there is learning from each other. You and I know each other. We talk, and I still learn things from you every time we chat. So bringing in two speakers who have never met, there's absolutely no doubt that people will learn from one another and really advance each other. So I'm looking forward to seeing you at the Play Day Summit, and I hope to see everybody else who is watching this video, space allows, be at the Play Day Summit with us. So see you then.
Take care.